Welcome to Radical Feminist Perspectives. Today we're going to hear about the book Life and Death, Unapologetic Writings on the Continuing War Against Women by Andrea Dworkin. It's discussed by Lierre Keith and Marian Rutigliano. So over to you two.
Great. Can we have the first slide? So here's our Andrea. If you have never read Andrea Dworkin, you need to just stop everything else you're doing in your life and pick up some Andrea Dworkin. And this book is not a bad place to start, Life and Death. It's a series of essays that she wrote. But before we talk about the book, I just want to say, Andrea, this was a portrait that was taken of her by her friend Elsa Dorfman, who was a photographer, a professional photographer. And she's wearing a t-shirt that says, "I'd rather be destroying pornography." And the story here is that this was way back in the 1980s when we did stuff like this, but I was facing some legal charges for destroying pornography with some friends of mine, which we did on the regular. It was a thing we used to do back then. And one of the ways that we were paying for all of our, these things are expensive no matter what. You have legal fees and you have lawyers and you need money. So I made this silkscreen and I printed up all these t-shirts, and everywhere we went, we sold them. So we always had a little backpack full of t-shirts, and we would sell. And that was mostly how we paid our lawyers, was by making these t-shirts. But of course, we made one for Andrea, and I mailed it to her just as a present. And then I got back this cute little postcard from her saying that her friend Elsa, the great photographer, had requested that Andrea, please, please let me take your photograph. I want you in my portrait collection. And Andrea didn't particularly want to do it, but she's like, all right, fine. You're my friend. Let's just get it done. But she said in the postcard, I was like one of these stupid things, like I literally had no idea what to wear. And then out of nowhere, this t-shirt arrives in the mail and she's like, we got it. So that's the t-shirt I made her, is what she's wearing. And I have a copy of this print of the Elsa Dorfman poster of Andrea, the print, and it's framed and it's just above where I sleep. So every night before I go to bed, I am blessed with this picture of Andrea wearing the shirt that I made her. So it's just a cute story. So anyway, Andrea, but I'm reminded again, as always, when you read Dworkin, that we are standing on the shoulders of giants, that she is one of the people who invented radical feminism. And a lot of what this book is about is how she did that, why she did that, the things that she knew about male violence and male sexual violence that drove her to write this book. She was just an extraordinary person. So next slide. So this is it's a series of essays. It's not like, a book from beginning to end. It's a series of essays about a bunch of different things. And it is, I think it's really one of her best. And if you want to start with Dworkin and you've never read any, this is probably a good one to start with, because it is, you can pick it up and put it down easily because it's essays. So it's probably a slightly larger, smaller gulp than like one of the big books, but it is absolutely, it's just an amazing collection. So, okay, next slide.
I should add, if you've never ever read any Andrea Dworkin, your first read may be a difficult one because she pulls no punches. She speaks about things that are very, very difficult to read, to hear, and she speaks to what a lot of women may have been experienced and have not wanted to talk about for a long time.
Yeah, it's tough. But it's always good. I mean, it's bracing, but you want to hear it because it's the truth.
Yep.
And so it's that sort of clarion call to justice that's always there, and her loyalty to women never wavers, and she's absolutely determined to do something about what we've been through. So so it's broken up into four sections. There's the first essay is rather long, and it's autobiographical, and it's why she's a writer and what she intends to do with being a writer. And so you learn a lot about her, kind of her life, her childhood, the first rapes that she experienced, and how all of this comes together to create the person that we knew as Andrea. And then there's emergencies, and that is a lot of things that were topical at the time. So Nicole Brown Simpson, who was the woman that was murdered by O.J. Simpson, what happened to her as a battered woman and why her story stands as the sort of prototypical case of being a battered woman, and a bunch of other cases that were media sensations at the time. Some of you, may not have ever heard about them, but they were very topical at the time. And then the next part is called Resistance. And some of that was, I skipped over some of that in today's talk. Some of it was about the anti-pornography ordinance that she authored with Catherine McKinnon, which was something that I worked on pretty heavily in the 80s. So it sort of brings you back to that time. But we had hope that we were going to do something. But the whole legal approach to porn, I just felt like was a much bigger discussion. There's a whole book they wrote about it that we could probably do as its own seminar. So I skipped a lot of the details of that legislation and what it meant and what it might mean and how we could do it. It just seemed like it was too big of a topic when we had all this other stuff. And then finally is the section on confrontations, and that's also a great series of essays about where we're going and how we're going to get there. So, okay, we can do the next slide. So even from the preface, I mean, she starts off with, you know, that she's 100% in from the very beginning. Why and how the perception of women as subhuman evolves such that violence and exploitation become habits rather than crimes. Here I also challenge women's exclusion from the right of speech as such, not simply from personal expression, from art or culture, but from creating the political premises we take for granted. In each essay, the silence or invisibility of women's experience and its meaning are shown as distorting, undermining, or destroying the political and moral integrity of a nation, an institution, a right, or an idea. It is my hope that because of the political work of feminists over the last quarter of a century, these writings may at last be read and taken seriously. I am asking men who come to these pages to walk through the looking glass, and I am asking women to break the mirror. Once we all clean up the broken glass, no easy task, we will have a radical equality of rights and liberty. So that's what she's after. Marian, anything you want to add?
No, it's just this first, you know, autobiographical part. You know, her life is just consciousness raising did a lot of things, but one of the things, at least, you know, when women first came to it, was that they looked around and they said, "Oh my God, it's not just me. It's not just me. It's everyone." So that is reading Andrea Dworkin, that's one of the things that that women, as difficult as it is to read, ultimately find to be just like a ray of light, in a way that it's not just me, and that there's something, you know, there's something that all women go through, and then it's just a question of interpreting it correctly. You can interpret it that there's something deeply wrong with how men treat women and come to the class analysis that is radical feminism, or you can misinterpret it and say, well, this is just the way it is, the poor dears. But Andrea takes you to what is really wrong if you keep reading.
Okay, next slide. So this is from the first essay, which is about her life and how she became a writer. So she's talking about her childhood, and she says, "I loved the world and living, and I loved being immersed in sensation. I did not like boundaries or want distance from what was around me. I saw adults as gatekeepers who stood between me and the world. I hated their evasions, rules, lies, petty tyrannies. I wanted to be honest and feel everything and take everything on. I didn't want to be careful and narrow the way they were. I thought a person could survive anything except maybe famine and war, or drought and war. When I learned about Auschwitz, my idea of the unbearable became more specific, more informed, sober, and personal." And I just think this is a great paragraph about moral development, that, you know, we come to this world with that kind of curiosity and that kind of passion. No matter what our personalities are, I think all children have that, you know, it is all about sensation when you're a young child. It's just everything is new, and it's just everything is so alive. And then, of course, there's all the narrowing that happens, and school does that, and our parents do that, and yep, certainly abuse does that. But then, you know, she starts to deal with the realities of history, of what has happened on this planet, and it's going to be harder and harder to survive. So you come up against this. You know, you think you're invincible as a child, or certainly as an adolescent, but then you have to grapple with how hard it is out there. And certainly Andrea had enough hardship that she really had to learn that early and often, and it was pretty horrible. So Yeah, so it's just sort of an interesting insight into her personality. And she also talks a lot of sadness about her mother, that how much she loved her mother when she was really young. And then there was just this split between them, that they were such different people that it was very, very hard to love each other. And I think that she felt a lot of grief over that. And she says, but I was the wrong child for my mother to have had. She preferred dull obedience to my blazing adoration. She valued conformity. My emotions were too extravagant for her own more literal sensibility. And I'm not sure that that was something that they ever were able to come to terms with. I think she had great chunks of time where she was just seriously estranged from her parents, and that's just not easy. You know, we need our families. So anyway, just some insight into her personally. So Marian, I don't know if you've got anything to throw in there.
No,
Okay.
there's a lot that could be said about mothers and daughters,
Yeah.
but
She doesn't ever really write about it beyond that essay. I never really found much else in her writing that was about her mom, but that just had to be very painful. So, all right, next slide. All right, here's a long one. It's really hard to just have a short quote from Andrea because the writing is so intense and so good. It's so spare and so eloquent and always on point. And it's like you need to get to the punchline, but to build to the incredible drama of where she's taking you, you have to read the whole thing. So I'm sorry, this is a long one. So she said, I'd like to take what I know and just hand it over. But there is always a problem for a woman being believed. How can I think I know something? How can I think that what I know might matter? Why would I think that anything I think might make a difference to anyone, anywhere? My only chance to be believed is to find a way of writing bolder and stronger than woman hating itself, smarter, deeper, colder. This might mean that I would have to write a prose more terrifying than rape, more abject than torture, more insistent and destabilizing than battery, more desolate than prostitution, more invasive than incest, more filled with threat and aggression than pornography. How would the innocent bystander be able to distinguish it, tell it apart from the tales of the rapists themselves, if it were so nightmarish and impolite? There are no innocent bystanders. It would have to stand up for women, stand against the rapist and the pimp by changing women's silence to speech. It would have to say all the unsaid words during rape and after, while prostituting and after, all the words not said. It would have to change women's apparent submission, the constant read into the silence by the wicked and the complacent, into articulate resistance. I myself would have to give up my own cloying sentimentality toward men. I'd have to be militant, sober, and austere. I would have to commit treason against the men who rule. I would have to betray the noble, apparently humanistic premises of civilization and civilized writing by conceptualizing each book as if it were a formidable weapon in a war. I would have to think strategically with a militarist heart, as if my books were complex explosives, minefields set down in the culture to blow open the status quo. I'd have to give up Baudelaire for Clausewitz. Yes, okay, I will. Yes, okay, I did. In retrospect, that is just what I did. And she did. She helped create radical feminism. She took all that pain that she had been through, all the rapes, the prostitution, the battering, all of it, and she turned it into a weapon that women could use because she chalked it out. She explained how it works. She explained the dehumanization. She explained what rape does to women. She explains the meaning of prostitution. Um, all because she knew, because she'd been through it all, just rape after rape after rape. And she understood the true nature of male sexuality under male dominance, which to that point nobody had really wanted to look at. And so she blew that open for us. So her books are a weapon of war, and it's the weapon that we need. So Marian, I don't know if you want to add anything.
someone in the chat is saying, could she give up completely her sentimentality towards men? Not an easy task. Um, I don't ever really respond to that. I'm lesbian. I feel like it's not my place to say, you're a straight woman and you can never do any better. It's always going to be like this with men, even though plenty of straight women come to the same conclusion. But I understand. I mean, I understand the frustration, and you can hear it in her writing. She invented, helped invent radical feminism. And this is why, women wrote about this stuff. And this is why that early in the second wave, that the women's movement created things like domestic violence shelters, greater job opportunities, equal pay, childcare, better laws to allow women to, if they wanted to walk away from men, to safely be able to walk away from men. So to that question, yeah, I mean, I think women can, but they needed the things that we created to be able to do that safely.
And most women are just never going to understand. They're just never going to come this far. They're never going to name men to the extent that somebody like Andrea Dworkin did. And I just feel like my whole life was made possible by the women who came before me. And I don't know, it just feels like it's all closing down again, doesn't it? So, all right, next slide. So this is really the beginnings of radical feminism. And we have to remember that no one had said this before. So I lived in a state of terror. Every trip outside might mean death if he found me. So this is about leaving her batterer when she lived in Amsterdam. No one knew about battery then, including me. It had no public name. There were no shelters or refuges. Police were indifferent. There was no feminist advocacy or literature or social science. No one knew about the continuing consequences, now called post-traumatic stress syndrome, which has a nice dignity to it. How many times, after all, can one say terror, fear, anguish, dread, flashbacks, shaking, uncontrollable trembling, nightmares? He's going to kill me. At the time, so far as I knew, I was the only person this had ever happened to. And the degradation had numbed me, disoriented me, changed me, lowered me, shamed me, broken me. Oppression meant the US in Vietnam, or apartheid in South Africa, or legal segregation in the US. Even though I had been tortured and was fighting for my life, I could not see women, or myself as a woman, as having political significance. I knew that the battery was not my fault. I had been told by everyone I asked for help, the many times I tried to escape, strangers and friends, that he would not be hitting me if I didn't like it or want it. I rejected this outright. Even back then, the experience of being battered was recognizably impersonal to me. But maybe I was the only person in the world this had ever happened to. But I knew it had nothing to do with me as an individual. It just never occurred to me that I was being hit because I was a woman. So this is the beginning. This is the moment when a woman, in this case Andrea, realizes that what is happening to her does count as political. It's not just happening in this, personal realm that is just bad luck, right? It is oppression like Vietnam or South Africa or segregation, that women are a class and that we are being politically subordinated by men, and that it matters. I mean, that's the final piece, is that it matters. An actual human being is being hurt when these things are done to us, and we're allowed to call that for what it is. So, but this is how women came to that awareness, and now hopefully there's enough of it in the culture that no woman has to be quite this alone ever again. But women had to like crawl out of a trench, a war trench, and by their fingernails, and figure out what is happening here. Like what words can we use to describe it? They didn't even have a vocabulary for it. No one had put domestic and violence together yet as a phrase. And this is what the early radical feminists did one by one, is they found the language to explain what was happening to women, and they insisted it was political. So here she is doing it. Marian, what do you think?
There's again in the chat, which is, and I'm glad this is kind of interactive this way. It's like, how can we, we need men to, perpetuate the species. And actually we don't. You can fertilize one ovum with the genetic material from another ovum. It's very technology dependent and it would need to be perfected, but it's possible. But there's such an implicit thing, especially in men, but even in many women, about, well, this is the way it is, or this is just the way it is. I have seen lefty men occasionally being asked by a woman, let's start with no rapes for 24 hours. Let's just, to a lefty dude or even a conservative dude, but especially lefty dudes, let's have no rapes, absolutely no rapes for 24 hours. And they all kind of back off. It's like, well, and you can, and that they just think it's not A, not possible, and B, how could you possibly even want to do that? That's just the way it is. And what Andrea hammers home is just like, no, this is like not the way it has to be. This is not inborn into men. They're not, it's not genetic. They're not born that way. This is something that is socialized into men as the oppressor class, to the point where men think, and a lot of women think, it's just, this is the way it is, but it isn't. It isn't.
Right. And that's a famous essay by Andrea, actually, from her collection, Letters from a War Zone. And the essay was called, I Want a 24-Hour Period in Which There Is No Rape. So I highly recommend looking that one up. And it was a speech that she delivered to a group of men. And she's like, all right, well, men want to hear from me. I'm going to tell you what I want. We want a 24-hour period, no rape. And that was her demand. So it's a fabulous essay. So I'd look that one up too, if you want to read that one. Okay, next slide. So then she decides that she is going to use her knowledge to do something about all of this, that she's not just going to slink away and try to put herself back together after these experiences, that it's going to mean something politically that she's been through this, that she's going to, this is her survivor mission, is to make this pain mean something in the public realm. So the vow that I made was that I would become a real writer and I would use everything I knew to help women. I didn't know how much I knew, how valuable it would be, but in 1972, what I knew was not part of feminism. What I knew about male dominance in sex or rape in marriage, for instance, the knowledge about male dominance in sex came not only from this one marriage, but from several years of prostituting before I got married. I called it, quote, being on the streets, and it consisted of equal parts whoring, poverty, and homelessness, and just being a tough girl. I had never kept it a secret, not from my husband, not from any friend. I had experience that could be knowledge. I made a vow to use it for women. Writers need to be damned hard to kill. So do women, of course. I had never believed in suicide, the female poet's alternative to standing her ground and facing down the power of men. I didn't like it that Plath and Sexton wrote strong and beautiful poems capturing the horror and meanness of male dominance, but would not risk losing socially conventional femininity by sticking around to fight it out in the realm of politics, including the politics of culture. I always wanted to live. I fought hard to live. This means I did something new. I have been bearing the unbearable and facing men down for a long time now. So that's the difference. That's where it turns. It's not enough for her to just, even just to say it out loud, like some of the poets did. Like, it's horrible. You know, every woman loves a fascist, Plath said so famously. And then she stuck her head in an oven. So they could see a lot of the problems, but they weren't willing to particularly do anything about it. And Andrea broke that boundary completely, flattened it, and said, no, this does matter politically. And I don't care how much they hate me and how much I am dragged through the culture over this. I am going to keep saying this out loud. And she was horribly condemned and attacked publicly for just having the temerity to name men, but she never gave up. So she is, in that regard, you know, she's just a warrior at heart, and she got it done. So she intended to do it and she did it. So I don't know, Marian, what have you got?
I know you've had the chance to speak with Andrea more than once, I think. Once in the 1979 Women's March Against Pornography in New York
Yeah.
City.
Right.
And somebody said, look, that's Andrea Dworkin. So I ran over and I thanked her for what she was doing, and it was said I was so glad she was there, and I said, what else what else can we be doing that we're not already doing? And she just said, it's going to get way worse before it ever gets any better, if it gets any better, but never give up. And that is like, my beatific moment with Andrea Dworkin, that just like, never give up. And that's been just like, never give up, never surrender.
Yeah, she had that spirit for sure. Okay, next. Instead of using my own experience as the immediate subject of discourse, I used a more complex method of exposing bone and blood. I found the social phenomena that could be pulled apart to show what I knew to be the essential heart of the experience. Rape, prostitution, battery, for instance, woman-hating, sexualized insult, bias, discrimination, and I found the language to carry it far, way past where critics could reach, or frankly, most men could imagine. I had the luck of having my books last over enough time to reach women, not elite women, but grassroots women and marginalized women. Slowly, women began to come to me to say, yes, that's right. And I learned more from them, went deeper. I used writing to take language where women's pain was and women's fear, and I kept excavating for the words that could bear the burden of speaking the unspeakable, all that hadn't been said during the rape or after, while prostituting or after, truths that had not been said ever, or truths that had not been said looking the rapist, the batterer, the pimp, the citizen John in the eye. This has been my contribution to literature and to the women's movement. Um, that's what she did. And she talks in this essay about how after her essays, that it was a collection called Our Blood, after that came out and she went around speaking, um, just woman after woman would come up with her to her after the talk and want to speak with her. And it was always the same, that they had never told the story of the rape before and they just couldn't stop talking and they would tell her the story. So she became the repository for woman after woman after woman. Um, and that was how she learned what she knew, was her own experience and then realizing that it was so many women, that there was this whole world of horror that just nobody was talking about. And how could we possibly say we lived in a democracy when this level of torture was happening every single day in America? Um, and it's a terrible moment to have to live through. And this is the path to radical feminism. You do have to face that, and it may kill you because it's pretty horrible knowledge. But she did it, and she laid out that path for us. And I love the citizen John. I just love that because that's exactly it. It's every one of these men, and they have all kinds of rights that we don't have. And they're Johns. You know, given the choice, they will uh, buy a teenager for sex, for rape. That's what they do. Men in business suits with all kinds of money. That's what they want, is a 15-year-old on the street. So that's who they are. Anyway, Marian, what you got?
I just, whenever I hear conversations about this, I always I call it the lib fem trifecta. Um, number one, not all men are like that. Number two, not my Nigel. He's a good one. Or, women do it too. And, mentally, if you're saying any of that in response to any of this stuff that she's writing about it, or that women are just like talking about in their lives, that's sort of the antithesis of the class analysis that radical feminism is, and it doesn't address all the everything that all these women came up to her and talked about over the years. None of that is relevant to these women's stories. Women come up with this is what happened to me, this is what happened to me, and none of it is ever addressed by saying, well, not all men are like that, or well, but I've got one, or not my Nigel, I've got one of the good ones, or hey, women can do that too. It doesn't address it. And if you're doing that, it's because it's less painful to do that. It's because we're socialized to do that and say that stuff. But it doesn't address the enormous suffering that women experience. Every woman experiences to some degree, as the oppressed class.
It's a diversion to say those things. And I think you're right that most women do it because they're diverting from the pain. They do not want to face how bad this is. They don't want to face that we're living in a war zone. They just don't. And so they need it to be, well, a few men, but it's certainly, quote, not all men. That's why we have that phrase, is because it's just a classic. And they don't want to face it. So they don't want to face the pain because it is bottomless. This level of pain is bottomless. It hasn't stopped. I mean, that's the thing. Around the world, it's only gotten worse in our lifetimes because of the porn industry, right? So that's a level of horror that you're going to face or you're not. You're either going to be a coward or you're going to be brave for women. And I can't make that decision for somebody else. Not all of us are cut out for it. I get that. And so women will divert. But the other problem is, even when you have faced it, the kind of social sanction that's coming your way if you stand up and say this. You know that your life will be destroyed. And a lot of women don't want to do that. They like their careers, especially if they are one of the culture makers, if they're in Hollywood or they're a writer for the New York Times or, You know, they've got a little bit of status. They're able to get some good work done in the world. They don't want that wrecked by being a radical feminist. It's you can't say these things out loud still. So yeah, that's the other diversion point is, well, some of this is true, and I kind of know that in my heart, but I'm not going to go anywhere with it because I need to have a normal life. And so that's the other sort of point where women deflect, and they just don't. They're not warriors. They don't have it in them. So for me, I just move on. I mean, that woman may follow eventually. She may get over that, but there's only so much you can say to women like that because I think for some of it's our nature, and this stuff just as painful as it is, we're the ones who cannot look away. We are always going to be fighting, and there's other women who just aren't made of the same stuff, and there's only so much you can push them. They may or may not come along, and I mean, in some way, I just had to accept that. It's just it's just our nature. Some people don't have the personality for it. And, you know, they can play some other role. Maybe they can write us a check. That's fine. We are always going to need money to do real activism. So it's fine behind the scenes if they want to do something else. But yeah, I'd rather have them with us here in the trenches, but not everybody they're just not cut out for it. So all right, next slide. On the streets, there were women who were both strong and fragile at the same time, immensely strong to bear the continuing sexual invasion, consistent brutality, and just plain bad weather, no joke. Immensely strong to accept responsibility as the prostituting persona. I want this, I do this, I am this, ain't nothing hurts me, and much too fragile to face either the cost of prostituting or its etiology. The cost was physical disintegration and mental splitting apart. The cost was getting dirtier and lonelier and anesthetizing pain with more and meaner drugs. The cost was accepting the physical violence of the Johns, moving through it as if it didn't matter or hadn't happened, never facing that one had been hurt, then hurt again, nor asking why. Some girls were straight out battered and forced, but even without a violent man in sight, the ideology always had to do with sexual abuse, in the present or in the past, also with homelessness and poverty, with the willingness of men to use any girl for small change, with abandonment, the personal abandonment of family, the social abandonment choreographed by the users. It may be harder to face abandonment than to endure exploitation, and there were no models for articulating the realities and consequences of sexual abuse. The point of dealing with political oppression has never been that the oppressed are by nature weak, therefore pitiful. The more injustice on one's back, the stronger one must be. Strong girls become strong women and use that strength to endure. But fighting injustice requires a dynamic strength, disciplined to resistance, focused on subverting illegitimate power, eventually to level it. The political use of female strength to change society for the benefit of women is a different choice, a harder, better choice than endurance, however noble or stylish the endurance. And that says it all right there. That's the moment when you take your personal pain. As strong as you've been to endure it, it's not enough. It's got to go one more step, and that step is to turn it into resistance. And I think a lot of the undertone of this book, the sort of the base note of this book is this point, is that we have got to make a serious resistance. It's not just enough to just survive what we've survived. It's not even enough to name what we've survived. We need a resistance movement, and we haven't done that enough. We've done it a little bit. We have had some successes, certainly, but not enough. We don't have the level of seriousness in this movement that we need. We don't have the number of soldiers we need. We haven't done it yet. It's women around the world are still living in these conditions, and it's enough of us haven't turned that corner yet. So, Marian, anything you want to add?
No, keep going, Lierre.
Okay, next slide.
Great stuff.
Wife beating is commonplace and ordinary because men believe they have rights over women that women dispute. The control men want of women, the domination men require over women, is expressed in this terrible brutality. What no one will face is this: the problem is not with the woman, it's with the perpetrator. She can change every weakness, transform every dependency. She can escape with the bravado of a Jesse James or the subtle skill of a Houdini. But if the husband is committed to violence and she is not, she cannot win her safety or her freedom. The current legal system, victim advocates, counseling, cannot keep her safe in the face of his aggression. So, I mean, for her entire life, she lived in terror of her ex-husband in Amsterdam. At any minute, he could have turned up and killed her. We know this. Any woman who's been with a batterer knows this. You're never safe. You're only safe when he dies. And then there's this huge heap of relief, that he's gone finally, because in this world, we do not keep women safe. So she's just pointing out this problem that women live in terror forever. The moment that you bump into one of these guys, there's never safety again in your life. And we know that the most dangerous time for a woman to leave a batterer or the most dangerous time for a woman is when she leaves the batterer. She's, I think, 11 times more likely to be killed in the few weeks after she leaves, because he is so enraged that his property has abandoned him, and how dare she think she can get away. So none of this has changed. We at least have language for it. We certainly have better women's shelters now. We didn't before. But nothing has changed to stop. We have not put ourselves between that woman and that harm and that man. Not as a society, we have not. I'm not saying individuals haven't done that, because I certainly have, and I'm sure some of you have at least tried to do that for women in your lives. But it is very scary, because they're relentless, these men. They're absolutely obsessed, and nothing seems to stop them. So we still need this movement. Marian, anything
Systematic.
you want to add?
Systematic. The
Yeah.
abuse, the violence, the barring. It's all systematic. It's never just one man who flipped out. Oh, I just, I snapped and I broke it. It's never that. And it's never because of, one man or one specific thing. It is systematic. It's built in, not because it's genetic. It's not genetic. It's built in because of the socialization. And it's become a self-sustaining system. Men get what they want out of this system. They get, sexual services, emotional labor. They get all this. Why would they want to change? And unless there are consequences for this behavior, and that's like just this Herculean task. Just how do we build in consequences for this systematic behavior?
Yep. Okay, next slide. We blame her as the batterer did. We ask why she stayed, though we, of course, were not prepared to stand between her and the batterer so that she could leave. After all, if after she's dead, we tell the police that we heard the accused murderer beat her in 1977 and saw her with black eyes, as Nicole's neighbors did. So this is Nicole Simpson, who was killed by O.J. Simpson. We will not be allowed to testify. Her neighbors were not allowed to testify, even though they had seen it. We will not be allowed to testify, which may be the only justice in this, since it has taken us 17 years to bother to speak at all. I had such neighbors. Every battered woman learns early on not to expect help. A battered woman confides in someone. When she does, to leave a trail. She overcomes her fear of triggering violence in the batterer if he finds out that she has spoken, in order to leave a verbal marker somewhere with someone. She thinks the other person's word will be believed later. So that's just really, really poignant. And of course, Nicole Brown Simpson died really horribly at the hands of O.J. Simpson, along with her boyfriend. He killed them both and got away with it. So that was a horrible moment in my life for sure, watching that trial. Marian, you got anything to add?
No, I mean, there's conversation in the chat because we all know this is
This is still the
ubiquitous.
truth. Yeah.
This is ubiquitous. If you want to do practical things, and I worked with a group once that helped women escape from the Mormons, especially the fundamentalist Mormons, from the the Amish, the Mennonites, even from some of the Orthodox Jewish sects. And if you can do something like that, do it. If you know that there's a woman who this is happening to, just make sure that she knows, if she has to, that your house is a refuge, that she could hide there if she has to. Really, really practical things. I mean, it's, she one of Andrea's books is Letters from a War Zone. It's a war, and it's a war zone for women who are being battered like this. So engage in some guerrilla warfare and protect other women.
Yeah. Okay, next slide. Okay, it's a long one. The governing reality for women of all races is that there is no escape from male violence, because it is inside and outside, intimate and predatory. While race hate has been expressed through forced segregation, woman hate is expressed through forced closeness, which makes punishment swift, easy, and sure. In private, women often empathize with one another across race and class because their experiences with men are so much the same. But in public, including on juries, women rarely dare. For this reason, no matter how many women are battered, no matter how many football stadiums battered women could fill on any given day, each one is alone. Surrounded by family, friends, and a community of affluent acquaintances, Nicole Simpson was alone. Having turned to police, prosecutors, victims' aid, therapists, and a women's shelter, she was still alone. Ronald Goldman may have been the only person in 17 years with the courage to try to intervene physically in an attack on her, and he's dead, killed by the same hand that killed her, an expensively gloved extra-large hand. Though the legal system has mostly consoled and protected batterers, when a woman is being beaten, it's the batterer who has to be stopped. As Malcolm X used to say, by any means necessary. A principle all women had better learn. A woman has a right to her own bed, a home she can't be thrown out of, and for her body not to be ransacked and broken into. She has a right to safe refuge, to expect her family and friends to stop the batterer by law or force before she's dead. She has a constitutional right to a gun and a legal right to kill if she believes she's going to be killed. And a batterer's repeated assaults should lawfully be taken as intent to kill. So this is just really powerful. This is still what we need to do. None of this has gotten any better in my lifetime. So this is still what we need. Marian, anything?
No. Keep going.
Okay, next slide. So this is a case some of you have probably not heard about. This is a long time ago, and it was in America, but Hedda Nussbaum, and this exploded across the culture. She was, of course, battered, viciously battered by this guy. I'm not even sure they were married. I can't quite remember. But anyway, she was with this horrible man, and there were 2 children involved as well. And the little girl, Lisa, the man also battered the kids. And at one point, he battered the little girl, and she was lying on the bathroom floor. And Hedda Nussbaum, the woman in this situation, was told by him, he was commanded, don't go in there and attend to her. She's being punished. She deserves it. Don't go in. And so she didn't go in, and the kid died. And so there was this huge media uproar about whether or not she bore some moral responsibility for the death of this child. Eventually, the state of New York, I mean, he was sent to prison. There was a huge trial that everybody watched. And this was like really a sort of a breakthrough moment for battering as a thing that, that finally it was being talked about in a really public way. And so this trial meant a lot to a lot of women. And the state of New York let her just sort of become a state's witness. She was not charged with anything. So she was a victim witness, but that wasn't even a concept that we had. We now have entire, offices in DA's offices. That's the victim witness office for women like Hedda Nussbaum and other people who are, assaulted or hurt in some way and are the main witness and also have been victimized. But they didn't have that then. I mean, so this was one of the first times that we saw this in real life. And so she testified. She was up day after day talking about what had happened to her. Anyway, that's the case as Hedda Nussbaum. So death looks different to a woman who has been battered. It seems not nearly so cruel as life. I'm upset by the phony mourning for Lisa Steinberg. That's the little girl who died. The hypocritical sentimentality of a society that would not really mind her being beaten to death once she was an adult. If Lisa hadn't died, she would be on West 10th Street being tortured now. Why was it that we wanted her to live? So that when the child became a woman and then was raped or beaten or prostituted, we could look right through her? It's bad to hit a girl before she's of age. It's bad to torture a girl before she's of age. Then she's of age, and well, it isn't so bad because she wants it, she likes it, she chose it. Why is it all right to hurt adult women? Those who love children but don't think adult women deserve much precisely because we are not innocent, we are used and compromised and culpable, should try to remember this. The only way to have helped Lisa Steinberg was to have helped Nussbaum. But to do that, you would have had to care that an adult woman was being hurt, care enough to rescue her. That still makes me cry. Yeah, I remember the first time I read that sentence, and it was just, you have to help the woman. You can't There's no way to help the child without helping the woman. You can't just extract children and leave the woman there. They're only being hurt because she's being hurt. It's male power. He thinks he owns them. That's it. You have to understand what's going on here. And this was just such a great reply to all those people who tried to say, oh, but she had some moral responsibility. She was tortured day in and day out by this man. I mean, you can read just the level of horror that this woman was going through. And when it happens to men, we call them prisoners of war. And we understand something about the psychology of what happens when you're being brainwashed day after day like this. You're being tortured and sleep deprived and deprived food and deprived clothing. You're kept in a state of just abject misery. So no, she didn't go in to help, and the kid died. So the whole situation is horrible. But you have to know that it's wrong to hurt women in order to help that child. So anyway, Marian, go ahead.
No, you already made the prisoner of war analogy.
Yeah.
Conversations with, men who've been prisoners of war in actual wars. I mean, it's the same thing happens. They get so beaten, just broken down, physically, become physically incapable and just mentally just so damaged, so that even if they want to help one of their comrades, they can't. They can't. I mean, they start out saying, well, we have loyalty to our fellow soldiers, but they get so broken down that they are not capable physically anymore of even helping. This is not, I mean, this is what men do. They do it in war, and they, official wars, and they do it in the great unofficial war that is oppression of women.
Right. So next slide. So this was another famous case that hit the press here in America in the late 80s. This guy, John Mack, he was working in a store, just a regular store, and a woman came in to exchange a set of Venetian blinds. And he said, all right, pick the ones you want. He took her into the back room and he viciously assaulted this woman. She actually lived through it, but I don't know how. He hit her with a hammer. He stabbed her multiple times. And then he dragged her body out to his car and went to a movie with her in the back seat of his car. He went to the movie theater. And I don't know how this woman survived this, but she did. And so there was this big trial about it. So, and then you learn a lot again about male violence and male complicity in other men's violence, because he went to work for a senator. He was the aide, and he was there for a decade and a half before anybody thought to care that he had nearly murdered a woman. Anyway, Max said, he just blew my cool for a second. Examined by a psychiatrist nearly a year later, Max said he had reacted in a way in which any man would perhaps react under similar circumstances. The circumstances he was referring to were long work days and a failing marriage. Happily, he wasn't saying he had an appropriate response to a woman choosing Venetian blinds. Unhappily, he was saying that bludgeoning the skull of a woman with a hammer, slashing her throat repeatedly with a steak knife, stabbing her in the breast and shoulder repeatedly, then going to a movie with the body left in the car was something, quote, any man would do if he were under pressure. It's an interesting and eloquent assertion of gender, implying as it does that it is natural for a man to use massive, grotesque violence against a woman, any woman, when he is upset. Court psychiatrist said that Max was sane when he committed the crime, that he knew right from wrong. Male dominance means that men who are sane, the way Mac was sane, run the country and control information. They are the government and the press. They shape reality through laws and perception. They protect any man's violence against any woman. Men in power make choices for violence. They protect violence in men because any man, under similar circumstances, would perhaps react the same way. It's the boys will be boys theory of good government, a government of men, not laws, not women. Yeah, they all defended him. The congressmen all defended him. And they said if he lost his job, there would be any number of senators would rehire him because he was so good at what he did, which was running the government, which is a government of men by men, because this doesn't get more brutal. And yet it was perfectly fine for him to be in government. So, Marian, you want to add anything?
No, I mean, in the chat, everyone is recognizing that yeah, any man would do it. And, how could they let him off? It's like, because any man would do it. That's not just hyperbole. Any man would do it. Any man would do it. You could pick a man at random and that man would do it. You could pick another man at random and that man would do it. And yes, I know not all men are like that. But but globally, across courtrooms where men are sitting on a jury, any man would do it, or would want to do it. So it's, again, if you say not all men are like that, that's fine. If you've got the 1 in 10,000 that wouldn't do it, but when they're sitting on a jury, even if they wouldn't do it, they would want to do it.
I have a little anecdote I'm going to throw in here. In 1991 or 2, we were trying to pass the anti-porn ordinance in Massachusetts, and we did get up to the stage of a hearing in front of the state Senate Justice Committee. So here's this panel of maybe 10 guys. So there they all are, sitting there at their table with their microphones, asking us all questions. And we had a bunch of very gruesome testimony from the women, of course, as you would imagine, about, their lives in the sex industry, what had happened to them because of the sex industry. We had, all angles, women were represented. And there was one woman named Lori who, her life was absolutely horrendous. And it was just this level of abuse over and over again. And she had been forced to work as a stripper multiple times by these pimps, essentially. And at the end of her talk, she said that as each night was over and the lights would come on and the men were forced to leave the bar, the strip club, that the janitors would come out and start sweeping up, and they always found wedding rings on the floor because, of course, these men would go in and remember that they were married and take their wedding rings off and try to put it in their pockets. And it was dark, and of course they would miss, and the wedding ring would fall to the floor, and they wouldn't be able to find it. When the lights came on, there would be the wedding rings on the floor, and she had a box of these wedding rings in her closet because she said that to live through this, you have to do so much forgetting, on a moment-to-moment basis when you're in that kind of, abusive, like horrendously abusive industry, like prostituting or stripping, that there's no way to remember what's happening to you moment to moment. It's all a persona. You keep having to make yourself forget. You do a lot of drugs, but she wanted to remember because she knew she was going to get out alive, and that was her goal. So she kept those wedding rings. She had a box of wedding rings in her closet so that she would remember what had happened to her and who these men were, and just the entire experience, that she was going to, get herself out. And she did. She was very, very brave. She's one of the bravest women I've ever met, but she had this box. So this is the point. I'm sitting there in the front row and I'm watching these men, the senators from Massachusetts, who are, they are in charge of the legislation. They are having these hearings. We have to get past this committee for there to be anything like a vote on the floor of the Massachusetts, state, whatever, the government there. And she says this thing about they found wedding rings every night. And I am not exaggerating, Marian. Every one of those men jumped when she said that because they all did it. They have all been to those clubs. They have all taken off their wedding rings. They knew what she meant. And they jumped. That entire panel. There was not one innocent man on that panel. They all knew what she was talking about. And I was like, you fuckers. And then also just the despair of, we are never getting this legislation. This is who we're up against. It's all of them. It was all of those men. It was an amazing thing. I don't know who else saw it besides me, but I'll never forget that moment. It was bad. Anyway, all right, next slide. I know we're running out of time here. We're not going to get this done. Okay, and so this was about Serbia. If you don't know what happened in Serbia in the late 80s, early 90s, it was absolutely dreadful. So there's she wrote an article about that. And so that was all this pornography used in Serbia when they were doing the ethnic cleansing, the genocide against blah, blah, blah. There was pornography everywhere. That's what all the reporters said. They made it into a joke. Some of the women took it seriously because there was horrible pornography made of the women who were being raped. Because this was really the first time they could do that. The technology to that point, they had cameras, but not much else, like still cameras, but not much else. But the video stuff had just, the technology had gotten smaller and smaller and easier, and then anybody could own it. And then the pornography just exploded. So that's one of the points that she's making in this essay. And what will the land of the free and the home of the brave do when the pornography of genocidal rape reaches our own homegrown men? No strangers to aggression against women by all statistical representations. The men will invoke their constitutional rights and consume it. The courts will protect it. Rape will travel with that pornography, as it does with all pornography. The rape of the women used to make it, now flattened and two-dimensional, to be enjoyed in perpetuity, whether the women are alive or dead, and the rape of new targets, three-dimensional and present in the flesh, nominally citizens, but not so that anyone has to notice. If the Constitution is ever to be women's too, it cannot protect de jure or de facto war on our bodies, the devastation of our dignity, the slow murder of so many of us through rape, prostitution, and pornography, the true trinity of woman-hating atrocity. And that is, of course, what has happened. Now we have the internet, and it's absolutely everywhere. The most degraded, deranged material is now available at a click, totally free, totally anonymous. So here we are. Marian, you got anything?
Yeah, I mean, it is, taken as a point of, truth that men are doing this because of pornography. That's kind of backwards. Who's making the pornography?
Right.
And where did the first guy who made pornography get the idea from? Men don't do this because of pornography, but pornography is just, a description of what they do. And it gets worse and worse and worse because it's like an addiction. It's now, just first just plain old sex didn't do it, and then it had to be more violent sex, and then it had to be anal, and it escalates and escalates and escalates. And men do this because of pornography? Yeah, kind of, but who's making the pornography? The pornography starts with what men are taught about how to treat women and what women are here in the world for. And they are not here in the world, and they don't think that we're here in the world to be equal loving partners in egalitarian loving relationships. So it's, when you think about, it's like, well, men only do it because of pornography. Yeah, but who's making the pornography, and where is it coming from?
Right. So, Joe, do we have time for one more? I know we're basically at the hour here.
Yeah, we do. We have time for
All
one
right,
more.
give us one more. If we are not willing to look at intercourse as a political institution directly related to the ways in which we are socialized to accept our inferior status, and one of the ways in which we are controlled, we are not ever going to get to the roots of the ways in which male dominance works in our lives. The basic premise about women is that we are born to be fucked. That is it. Now, that means a lot of things. For a lot of years, it meant that marriage was outright ownership of a woman's body, and intercourse was a right of marriage. That meant that intercourse was per se an act of force because the power of the state mandated that women accept intercourse. She belonged to the man. The cultural remnant of this is that in our society, men experience intercourse as possession of women. The culture talks about intercourse as conquest, women surrendering, women being taken. This is a paradigm for rape, not a paradigm for reciprocity, equality, mutuality, or freedom. When the premise is that women exist on earth in order to be sexually available to men for intercourse, it means that our very bodies are seen as having boundaries that have less integrity than male bodies do. Men have orifices, men can be penetrated. The point of homophobia is to direct men toward women, to punish men for not using women. Homophobia is an acknowledgement of how aggressive and how dangerous men know male sexuality can be for women. So she wrote an entire book on this subject that's called Intercourse. I'm pretty sure there was a WDI seminar on it. So you should look that up and then read the book. If this intrigues you at all, if this disturbs you at all, if this tells the truth to you at all, she wrote an entire book on this subject, and it's well worth the read. She's been accused of saying that all intercourse is rape. She never said anything that silly, but she did take this very seriously as politics. So I would highly recommend reading the book. Yeah. So, Marian, what do you want to say? Because I think we're basically at the end.
Yeah, we're basically at the end. Andrea Dworkin can be difficult to read, but very few people write so truthfully. Very few feminist writers, as great as they are as good as, they're not as good as Andrea at hooking up. This is what radical feminism is. This is what our class analysis is, and here's how my life taught me that. So if you can read Andrea Dworkin, you should read Andrea Dworkin. She was pretty great.
And she's missed. She died so young.
Yeah.
It's just horrible that she was gone so early. But she left us a legacy, and we need to be those warriors. She asked us to be that in this book. After Mark Lepine killed those women, there's an amazing speech in there. But we have to be those women, the women that Mark Lepine tried to kill. We have to be them.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Here.